So I've been using Anchor for over a year now, and it's one of the easiest ways to make a podcast. It's free, and there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership if you want to or wish to. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And if you want to make a podcast, you can go to anchor.fm to get started. And it is very easy to do to make a podcast on there. And you have unlimited data memory on there as well. I would recommend using Anchor to make a podcast. Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. Good morning. So the next Facebook chat for my podcast audience members who have NVLD or know somebody who has NVLD and wants to support them more will be November 20th, which is the third Saturday of the month, and will be at 10 a.m. specific time zone. And this is basically, well, not basically, it is a safe space for you to talk about whatever you want. It doesn't have to be about NLD, but it can be. And there's confidentiality, and nothing will be shared outside of the group unless you have that person's permission to share it outside of the group with somebody else. And it's a pretty small group, usually with about 4 or 5 people. And we meet from 10 a.m. to 11:30, usually, in Pacific time zone on Facebook. So if you want to come, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com or message me at livingwithnld on Facebook or Instagram. Thank you. And Twitter. I hope to see you on November 20th. To access the testimonials, there are 2 ways. There's a testimonial page with the full quotes, and then there is a slideshow on the home page with excerpts of the longer ones and the short ones. On the last image of the testimonial quote with Julia's quote, you can click on it and it will take you to the testimonial page where it shows you all of them with the full quoted testimonials. I did it that way because I wanted it to be easier to read on the home page, since some of them were a little longer than a testimonial usually is. And then I wanted to make sure that you could see the whole testimonial on the testimonial page. So I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, you can email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com and I will try to show you how to access it. Thank you. Hope you're having a good weekend. Bye. So I would also like to thank the NVLD Project for the Welcome Ambassador package that they sent me this week. It contained a NVLD water bottle that has their logo on it and says "Count Me In," and has their website, which is nvld.org, on there. And it had a little canvas bag tote that is reusable, which I love reusable things, and it had their logo on the outside of that as well. It had another t-shirt for them, and then it had a little fold-out pop-up thing that was paper that had each of their NVLD hands with their logo, the orange, the red, the pink, the turquoise, and the purple, I think, was the other color, and just explain what NVLD is, and also their mission with NVLD, and some other things that they do. And actually, I would like to take some time to read that to you because I thought that was very well done. So underneath what NVLD is, it says people with NVLD or nonverbal learning disability struggle with a range of conditions that include social and spatial disabilities. Often they are marginalized and isolated. Consequently, they can experience social barriers throughout their lives. That was the pink hand. And then the turquoise one, founder's inspiration. The NVLD project was inspired by my daughter, who was diagnosed with nonverbal learning disability at the age of 5. My daughter's unwavering determination and courage inspired me to create a supportive and inclusive community to help children, adolescents, and adults with NVLD. That's from the founder of the NVLD project, Laura Lemmy, who has a PhD. The purple hand, the NVLD project. The NVLD project envisions a world where those with nonverbal learning disability can receive a helping hand, live their lives to the fullest, and are free of any stigmatization. Our main goal is to secure an official diagnosis for NVLD, specifically to gain recognition for its as a valid disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM. At the NVLD Project, we are dedicated to raising awareness and funds so that those who have NVLD are understood and counted in on life. We accomplish this through a variety of programs, including educational workshops, expert research, and ongoing advocacy. And the orange hand, help change a life, donate. Can the NVLD Project count on you? Please support our efforts to create helpful solutions for children and adults with nonverbal learning disability. To donate or learn more, please visit www.nvld.org or contact us, the NVLD Project, 177 East 87th Street, Suite 501 in New York, New York, 10128. And their phone number 212-257-4906. I'll also put that in the podcast description for you, and I'll put the link to their website in there as well. But I thought that little pop out, and I say it's a pop out because it unfolds, was very well done, and it just describes what they do and who they are, and what they try to do for people with NVLD. And I say try because sometimes it can be hard to do things for people with NVLD depending on what it is and where you live and what you're trying to accomplish. Like I know with the DSM piece, it I think they've been working on that for a while, and it was in the DSM originally, but it was taken out because there was no one agreed upon definition of NLD, and they think it will be back in the DSM in a couple of years, which will be really good because then more people can get help. So thank you, NVLD Project, for the package that you sent me for being an ambassador, or becoming an ambassador, I should say. And I look forward to working with you guys. Thanks. Hello. So today's episode will be on NLD and hand-eye coordination, also slower reflexes. Do you ever have challenges with hand-eye coordination or have slower reflexes than other people you know? I know I have a little bit of both. We'll be discussing these topics today. Here's an article titled, "What is a Nonverbal Learning Disability?" by Jan Herzer, written on September 16th, 2019 from NESCA. It explains NLD and coordination. Quote, "The right side of the brain is responsible for the collection and integration of multiple sources of information, particularly sensory information, lending to an organized, in quotes, big picture understanding of events or information. The right brain is thus not only important for basic visual processing and reasoning, but it is also responsible for the organization and coordination of information and skills across a wide range of domains. Coordination of information and skills, domains, including learning, motor, coordination, self-regulation, for example, sensory regulation and attention, social thinking, and task management. As such, the word learning with the nonverbal learning disability, in quotes, title is somewhat of a misnomer, as NLD can impact functioning across most any domain. Motor integration. Individuals with NLD demonstrate some level of motor integration or coordination difficulties. This may involve fine motor skills, for example, poor handwriting and spacing on the page, difficulty tying shoes and using utensils, etc. Gross motor skills, for example, clumsiness, awkwardness when running, poor hand-eye coordination, etc., or both. Most often, individuals with NLD have appropriate motor strength, but they struggle to appropriately integrate and manage their movements within space and present demands. This may also correspond to difficulties with directionality and find their way around, causing them to get lost easily. End quote. This article does a good job of explaining why one with NLD might have a hard time with hand and eye coordination and may be clumsy. My level of clumsiness has decreased in my life as I've been more active. Once I started to do Aikido, a Japanese martial art, self-defense martial art, I should say, it was easier for me to fall properly when skiing. I fell more loosely than rigid and tight. Consequently, I had never broken a bone. Once I started cross-country running, I was able to be more careful with my footing and improve my balance. When I started to jump rope and play jacks this year, my reflexes started to get a little faster. Also, when I am practicing catching things like balls or keys, it's easier now than it used to be. This has helped me with driving too. It's very important to have fast reflexes when you're driving because it can save your life and someone else's. Another article from the NVLD Project titled NVLD and Lifelong Challenges by Eileen, who is grateful for all the support she has. Quote, for example, many with an NVLD can't do their hair, nor can they put makeup on by themselves, as the level of spatial and fine motor skills required to do that is beyond their ability. This can be challenging, especially during their teenager years, and it can make them feel self-conscious and send the message to others that they don't care as much about their appearances, which is not true. In addition, blow drying their hair can take twice as long, and often not all of your hair is dry, as the hand-eye coordination required for it is often too much, and you may end up going to school with all of your hair dry except a big spot you have missed. End quote. Luckily, I don't have to wear makeup. I'm not very good at hair blow drying or styling my own hair. That's why I prefer to let it air dry. I did have a meltdown recently this year, and I did a podcast episode about styling my hair, and I talked about that meltdown in episode 52 if you want to go to that and listen to that. And I'm also lucky that with my hair, it's naturally curly, so I don't have to style it that much. I really can just sleep with it wet and it curls itself. So I am very fortunate with that. And the reason I don't need makeup, which I'm fortunate for that as well, is I have very clear skin, and I was born with that because of my genes, and not bragging about that, just stating a fact. And I rarely get a pimple, so I'm fortunate for that as well. So here's some tips of how to try to make your coordination and slower reflexes better. You can try to make the coordination and difficulties of NLD not so difficult for you in your life, so your life is easier. And the following article talks about that. Here's another article from the NVLD Project titled The Dark Ages of NVLD by Bill, who is 68 years old, retired IT professional who was diagnosed with NVLD at age 49. Quote, I ended my elementary school years on a powerful note as I slammed a home run in the annual 5th grade versus 6th grade softball, helping us 6th graders to a victory. I was on the A squad, which itself was an achievement for me. I was and still am somewhat clumsy. I remember as a 9 or 10-year-old trying to execute a somersault in my room, falling to the side instead of moving straight ahead. But besides reading, sports were my main interest. I was lucky that I had a dad who was athletic and drilled me in baseball fundamentals. My hand-eye coordination was good enough to turn me into a pretty good baseball as a kid, coupled with this strong interest, much practice, and good training, so I was able to tap down NLD's limitations, end quote. When I talked about my level of clumsiness decreasing and reflexes improving earlier in this episode, part of me doubted that would ever happen in my life because I have a hard time believing in myself sometimes. But I've tried working on that more this past year and since I've graduated from college. When I was a senior in college, I wasn't sure if I was going to graduate, but it was the belief from my family, especially my mom, that carried me through to the end of the year to graduation. Also, putting my cap and gown on occasionally helped too. It was so close that I could taste and feel it and what it was like to touch it. But I didn't know what it would be like or how it would feel until I would walk confidently across that stage of my life. Now, when I have issues with believing in myself, I remind myself of how far I have come since graduation, which was more than 3 years ago. Doesn't seem like that sometimes, though. I remind myself of all my accomplishments and what I've learned from my mistakes. This helps me to have more self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-trust. I also say to myself when I'm having a hard time believing I can do something, I can do this. I also take a deep breath before saying that, and sometimes I say it more than once. As I wrap up, I would like for you to know that there are NVLDers out there with hand-eye coordination and slower reflexes challenges today. I would love to hear from you about your hand-eye coordination and slower reflexes issues. Please comment on livingwithnld.com or YouTube, or email me about them at livingwithnld@gmail.com. If you also want to learn more about this topic or something that relates to this topic, go to episode 9, which is on sports. And that will go with the hand-eye coordination because sports has a lot of coordination, and being able to do sports well is tricky when you have NLD because of the fine motor skills and falling down a lot and being clumsy usually, and trying to be active with NLD can be tricky because of that. I hope you learned something new and enjoyed today's episode. Talk to you next Friday. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you, my audience. Please know that just because I have a podcast doesn't mean that I'm perfect in every way and don't make mistakes. I make them every day and try to learn from them. I hope that this podcast helps you feel included, not alone, inspired, safe, and encouraged to make your life a little easier for you every day or chance you have the opportunity to. I would like to hear from you, especially if you have topics that you would like to know more about relating to NLD. I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. Also, please email me if you would want to be interviewed on this podcast or if you need support with something related to NLD. I'm always happy to help in any way I can. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I will talk to you next Friday. Bye.